Welcome to the Runetech Archives. Book 1, Bronze and Blood. Chapter 3, Teeth in Trouble. Edric didn't move. He lunged, sudden and terrifyingly smooth. In one sharp motion, he snatched the front of my shirt and yanked me upright. My boots scraped the concrete as I stumbled for balance, his grip hauling me close like I weighed nothing. His face stopped an inch from mine, eyes narrow slits, red pupils burning with a heat that felt way too alive. "Let's find out where you start to shake," he said softly. His canines weren't monstrous, just slightly longer, sharper, precise, purpose-built. His grip tightened, air vanished, my chest spasmed as my lungs clawed for something that wasn't there. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, loud enough I was sure they could hear it. Then, just as the edges of my vision began to darken, his fingers eased. Not enough to help, just enough to remind me what oxygen felt like. "There it is," he whispered. "Fear." I could smell blood and mint gum on his breath. His grip tightened again, not harder, just longer. My hand shook against my wrist. My lungs screamed. Spots bloomed at the edges of my vision, bright and ugly. The world narrowed. A tunnel of flickering light and Edric's burning eyes. Behind him, Vane didn't bother stepping closer. He didn't have to. He lingered exactly where he stood, still smiling, razor-thin and patient, like he was watching a show he already knew the ending to. His pupils tightened, his head tilting slightly, studying me with the detached curiosity of a predator evaluating its prey's expiration date. "Corvin," a stern, raspy voice, like wind through a shell, cracking the moment in half. "You're being released pending investigation." Everything froze. Edric held me there for the barest fraction of a second longer, not resisting, not surprised, savoring. Then he let go. I collapsed back onto the bench, dragging in a ragged breath that burned all the way down. Officer Callan Dureth stood on the other side of the bars. Unless you knew what to look for, you'd never peg him as a deepborn. His skin held a faint olive gray tint, like kelp drying on a riverbed. His deep green eyes caught the light in ringed reflections, almost human until you noticed the shimmer. Dark brown hair, nearly black, cut short but perpetually unkempt. The biggest giveaway was his hands, broad, strong, with the faintest webbing between the fingers. "You two back away," he ordered. Vane's smile vanished. Edric's jaw tightened. They stepped back, slowly, like predators giving space only because something bigger wandered into the hunting ground. Callan unlocked the door and swung it open. "Must go, Fade." "Sorry, guys," I coughed out, voice cracked and raw. "Rain check?" My throat still burned where Edric's grip had been. I tried not to rub it as I blinked away the water pooling at the corners of my eyes. I pushed myself upright, unsteady, and slipped past them. Not fast enough to show fear, not slow enough to tempt them. They didn't move an inch, not even a twitch. Waiting. Only their eyes followed me, tracking like predators watching prey leave the cage. "That's enough, you two. Fade, I suggest you hurried along." He didn't have to tell me twice. As I crossed the threshold, a breath of air ghosted the back of my neck. I turned. Edric and Vane were right at the bars, not moving, not talking, just watching. Edric's voice followed me, mild and certain. "We'll see you around." Callan rested a hand on his gun. "Try it." Edric lifted his hands in a mocking shrug. "Just having fun, Officer Flood Spawn." Callan slammed the door so hard the bars rattled like bones. Then they slinked back into the corner, smiles gone thin. "Let's go," he muttered. I moved. Callan didn't say anything at first. He just walked. Long strides, steady rhythm, Kind of pace that told you he was keeping a lid on something. I followed close behind, still rubbing the sore spot on my throat where Edric's hand almost left a permanent reminder, my head still pounding from the lack of oxygen. We passed another row of holding cells. Faces watched from behind bars etched with containment runes, some human, some not so much. All of them wearing the same trapped animal look. The runes buzzed softly, a sound like hornets smashing themselves against glass. The perpetual hum only made my headache worse, blending in with the pounding in my temples and the veins still throbbing in my throat. It was enough to make me wish I didn't hear it like the majority of people. Callan's boots echoed, mine followed in ragged sync. We moved through the numb glow of half-flickering lights. The hallway stretched on like some bureaucratic labyrinth built from damp brick and bad decisions. Every wall carried the same smell, burnt coffee, wet concrete, and old Magick. The station outside the holding block felt colder than the cell. The whir of ether-powered fans mixed with the low murmur of voices, punctuated by the occasional shout of protest. Somewhere deeper in the station, typewriters clattered. It was the dry rattle of bureaucracy's teeth. We pushed through the double doors into the front lobby. 2 rookies manned the desk. They stiffened when they saw Callan. Not from fear, but uncertainty. It happened a lot. Deepborn didn't get much work in this city, badge or not. "Evening, Officer Dureth," one said, voice cracking on the last syllable. "Evening," Callan replied, tone clipped but polite. Outside, the night hit us like a damp towel. Cold air, wet asphalt, the smell of rain threatening round 2. A row of old-world patrol cars crouched along the curb, relics from back when engines relied solely on gasoline. No ether and no tricks. Callan went for the nearest one and unlocked it. "Get in." I slid into the passenger seat. It felt nice being in a patrol car without cuffs, especially in the front. Almost luxurious. He turned the key, the engine coughing to life. We drove in silence for almost a full block. Then Callan exhaled hard, running a hand down his face. "You all right?" My throat ached when I swallowed. "You know, peachy." His eyes cut toward me. "I suppose that's another save to put on my tab," I said wryly. "Thanks for the rescue." Callan snorted. "Wouldn't call it a rescue." "Still got me out of there." He hesitated, just for a fraction. "Custody wasn't secure, plus not sufficient evidence. They couldn't justify holding you." "Someone higher up agree with that?" Callan met my eyes. "Someone didn't disagree." I nodded. "Close enough." He let out another huff. I let out a nervous laugh. Pretty sure Edric was about to redecorate me across the cell. "Sure seems like he was sending a message," he said. "Great. Love a message." Dark clouds still hung low over the city. The rain had stopped, but only to catch its breath. It would start again. It always did. Portland had a way of seeping into your bones, reminding you who really ran things. The city breathed around us, slow and heavy. "This is some serious shit you've gotten yourself into, Vade," Callan said, the humor draining from his voice. "That's what everybody keeps telling me." Not my first dance with danger, just the first where someone else picked the music. I've made my share of questionable choices over the years. It tends to attract the wrong kind of attention. "I'll only be able to help you so much," Callan said quietly. "This isn't like anything before." He wasn't wrong. We went back a few years, back before I was a murder suspect. Callan had been part of a sting on a black market ring dealing in rune-etched goods. He needed a Runetech's insight. Somehow he settled on me. Truth was, he didn't get much help from anyone else. Even with the traces faint, most folks could tell he was Deepborn if they looked close enough, and most didn't feel like lifting a finger for his kind. Pedestrians, fellow officers, didn't matter. Some people only needed an excuse to look away. The world had changed and people adapted. Most days they went about their lives pretending not to remember what had flipped everything on its head, or would still move beneath the water. Deepborn made pretending harder. They looked too much like what the city wanted to forget, and folks needed someone to blame when things went wrong. It didn't matter to me what someone was born as, only what they fought to be. And Callan? He was the kind you were lucky to cross paths with. Not that I would ever admit that to him. Turned out the black market ring was run by the Iron Howl, a feral gang that lacked imagination when it came to names, but not firepower. Goods seized, shots fired, headlines made. A rookie cop earned his badge of honor. A friendship was forged. Deep-born or not, they couldn't hold him back once he made a name for himself. Appreciate it, I said, my tone matching his. I just can't figure out why me. Any hints who actually did the shooting? None that's made it down the chain. Maybe one of the feral gangs making a move on the Blackthorns, using you as their scapegoat for payback? It fit on paper. Street gangs and organized crime families weren't exactly the best of friends, and I wasn't the Iron Howl's favorite person. Still, something about it felt off. I ran a hand through my hair, an old habit. It doesn't feel right. There's something else, Callan said with a wince. Orders are to close this case yesterday. Problem is, they don't have enough to hold you, so here we are. A weight dropped in my stomach. Fantastic. Once the seer comes back, you'll be brought back in, he added. Lucky for you, she's still about a day out. 24 hours, give or take. Just enough time to make things worse. The city rolled past in smeared reflections, a patchwork quilt of rune and ritual. Steam hissed from broken pipes. The few remaining trees clung to their last leaves, defiant against the coming winter. Even over the hum of the engine, I heard the growl of a zeppelin passing overhead. The wails of the sky, great lumbering things. I wondered for a moment if airplanes were ever this loud. The only time I've ever heard one was in movies. We passed by the east side sunken valley, flooded district once more. I watched through the window as the roads bled into the canals, asphalt vanishing under black water that shimmered like oil in the lamplight. The waters kissed the road we were on, patient and hungry, taking the city 1 inch at a time. Street lamps stared down at their reflections, warped and trembling. Buildings leaned toward the water like old men on canes, their windows hollow and dark. Some had built makeshift jetties and floating decks. The city wasn't dead, just transformed. The bones of the old world still here, creaking beneath something new, something wet and deep and patient. The sunken road still had traffic. Skiffs and rafts glided where asphalt once stretched. Cloaked pilots pulled through the narrow alleys, lanterns swaying and smearing pale green and amber light over the shifting water. One raft matched our pace from a block over, its rider hidden beneath a hood, face swallowed by shadow, eyes faintly glinting in the dark. For a moment, it felt like they were following us. The hooded figure kept looking over, just enough to notice, never enough to read their expression. Then, after a moment, they stopped keeping pace. The raft drifted back, swallowed by the gloom and the slow pulse of the water. I was exhausted, the kind that made your bones feel heavier, weighing you down. The hum of the tires on wet asphalt was almost enough to lull me under. Street lamps bled faded emerald light across the slick pavement, reflections trembling like they were afraid of something. I longed for my bed in my tiny apartment above the shop. One more block. Do me a favor, Fade, Callan said, breaking the silence. Don't do anything stupid to make things worse. You know me so well. Yeah, he sighed. Unfortunately, I do. Honestly, I just want to get home and get some sleep. A yawn slipped out to make the point. We turned onto my street, the familiar stretch of broken brick and old street lamps. The rain had paused but left the asphalt slick and shining. Something was wrong. Callan slowed. Fade, he said, his voice low. Yeah, I breathed. I see it. We rolled to a stop outside my building. The door to my workshop hung crooked on its hinges. Splinters lay scattered across the threshold. The frame had been kicked clean through. At least the glass was intact. Callan killed the engine and stepped out, hand already hovering near his holster. I got out slower, my gut twisting. "I'll go first," he said. "Be my guest," I said, motioning him forward. He moved like a ripple across water, quiet, practiced, deliberate. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dark, revealing destruction that immediately set my teeth on edge. Not the sloppy kind you get from junkies or bored kids. This was thorough. But from where I stood, it was chaos. Inside, the air felt stiller than it should be. Heavier. The usual scent of copper and ozone had curdled under burnt ether and damp wood. Whoever broke in hadn't cared about subtlety. They'd come in like a storm. Books littered the floor, torn from their shelves with enough force to split a few spines clean down the middle. Pages fluttered in the draft, whispering against one another like restless ghosts. My reference tombs. Years of notes, diagrams, experimental rune circuits had been dragged down and left in a single, sodden heap. Something inside me twisted tight. Those books meant more to me than most people. I'd walked into a massacre. I couldn't tell what was missing. Everything looked drowned. My desk had been flipped on its side, drawers spilled open like entrails. Ink pooled across rune diagrams, blurring lines I'd spent hours perfecting. Globs of viscous black seeped across the floorboards, half drying into tacky streaks. Near the workbench it was even worse. Tools bent, shattered, or tossed so hard they cracked the wall in places. Ether conductors snapped in half, flux vials crushed under boots, entire trays of calibration pieces scattered across the floor, metallic bits glittering like spilled teeth. The twist inside threatened to burst. This wasn't just a room. This was my livelihood. Years of work, habit, rhythm had been torn apart. Callan swept the light toward the back. "Whoever did this didn't hold back." "Yeah," I said, throat tight. "They weren't here for petty theft." He glanced at me. "You think this was the outfit?" "I think I've pissed off the wrong people," I muttered. The spiral staircase stood still, but a section of railing was broken clean through. Muddy footprints marked the path upward, multiple sets, overlapping, impossible to count at a glance. Old mud, new mud, tracking everywhere. No. The mud was drying at the edges, cracking faintly. A couple of hours old, tops, which meant the break-in happened right after I got hauled to the station. Almost like someone knew exactly when the cops would be knocking on my door. I stepped around Callan, careful not to disturb the mess. Every overturned book, snapped tool, and gouged plate painted the same picture. They weren't here long, but they knew what they were looking for. They turned the place upside down. I couldn't tell what had been taken. Could barely tell what had survived. I wanted to rage, to tear through the wreckage and scream until something answered. But all I could do was stare. Outside thunder rumbled, distant and low, like something enormous turning over in its slumber. So much for sleep. The night had other plans. Thanks for listening to the Runetech Archives. Bronze and Blood is the first book in an upcoming series, with a planned release date of March 2026. This podcast is a narrated preview of the story ahead of launch. If you'd like updates on the book, future chapters, or what's coming next, you can visit the website to sign up for news or go ahead and just follow along on social media. Links to everything are in the episode description below. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next chapter.